The morning sun streamed softly through the kitchen window as I arranged the final pink roses in the crystal vase, the very same one my mother had left me 40 years ago. Today was Zoe's 32nd birthday, and despite everything, I had spent the entire week preparing the celebration with the same careful attention I'd always given to her special days. The dining table gleamed beneath the chandelier, set for 12 with my finest china, the pattern she once deemed too fancy for everyday use but secretly adored. I smoothed the navy dress she had bought me last Christmas, though I suspected her husband Richard had picked it up on clearance, and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. At 63, I still carried myself with the grace my mother had insisted on, even when my heart felt as fragile as autumn leaves. The doorbell rang precisely at 2 o'clock. Zoe swept in wearing a designer dress I knew cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her husband Richard followed behind with their 2 children, Emma, who was 8, and Michael, who was 10. My grandchildren barely glanced up from their phones as they passed me, mumbling distracted greetings. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, wrapping my arms around Zoe gently. She felt stiff, her eyes already scanning the room as if weighing the effort I'd made against some invisible mental tally. "Mom, you really didn't have to go to all this trouble," she said, but the tone implied she expected nothing less. Richard nodded briefly and made a beeline for the liquor cabinet I had stocked with his favorite bourbon, the expensive kind that cost me a week's worth of groceries. The rest of the guests arrived in waves, my son-in-law's parents, Zoe's college friends, a handful of neighbors she specifically asked me to invite. I moved through the afternoon like a shadow in my own house. Refilling glasses, serving the 3-course meal I'd spent 2 days preparing, tidying up discarded wrapping paper from gifts I'd carefully chosen and wrapped. Nobody asked how I was feeling. Nobody mentioned the 15 pounds I'd lost since my last doctor's visit, or how empty and too quiet the house felt since William had passed 3 years ago. They took my hospitality for granted, like air, invisible, expected, and unremarkable. As evening fell and the crowd thinned, Zoe and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with plates still sticky from the birthday cake I'd baked from scratch. She leaned against the counter, wine glass in hand, studying me with the cool, calculating look she had perfected at her corporate job. "Mom, there's something important we need to discuss," she said, her voice carrying that unmistakable tone she used when delivering news that was already set in stone. I kept loading dishes, my hand steady despite the tightening in my chest. "What is it, honey?" "Richard got the promotion. We're moving to a new house in Westchester next month." She paused, swirling her wine. "We've been talking about what to do with you." The plate in my hand slipped slightly, but I caught it before it fell. "What do you mean, with me? You can't expect me to stay here alone, Mom. This house is too big and expensive to keep up, and honestly, you're at the age where you need some supervision." She said it as plainly as if she were discussing the weather. "We've researched some really nice assisted living communities." I carefully set the plate down, every movement deliberate. "I'm 63, Zoe. I'm not frail. You're forgetting things. Last month, you called me 3 times about the same prescription, and Mrs. Henderson said she saw you wandering the garden at midnight in your nightgown." "I was checking on the roses. There'd been a storm." "See, that's exactly what I mean. Normal people don't garden at midnight." She finished her wine and placed the glass down with a firm clink. "We've already put a deposit down at Sunset Manor. It's lovely. They have activities, meals included, medical staff on site." Her words hit me like sharp blows. I gripped the counter's edge, feeling that familiar weight of being controlled, diminished, turned into a problem to be managed. "And the house?" "We'll sell it, of course. The equity will cover the facility, and any leftover money will go into a trust for the kids' college funds." She was already pulling out her phone, probably texting Richard about how smoothly the talk had gone. "Oh, and Mom, we'll need you to start sorting through your things. You can only bring personal items, clothes, a few photos, that kind of stuff. No furniture." I stood in my shining kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of her celebration, feeling something cold and hard form in my chest. 40 years of marriage, 32 years of motherhood, a lifetime of memories and choices. Reduced to personal belongings and that kind of stuff. When do you want my answer? I asked softly. She glanced up from her phone, surprised. Oh, it's not really a question, Mom. The papers are already signed. You have until the end of the month to pack. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the dishwasher's hum and Richard calling her from the living room. I studied my daughter's face, the face I had kissed goodnight for 18 years, the face I'd seen graduate, walk down the aisle, and glow with joy holding her first child. Zoe, I said at last, my voice so calm it startled even me. Look at me. She lifted her eyes, irritation flickering briefly at being interrupted from her phone. The only thing you can still offer me, I said slowly, each word deliberate, is work. Isn't that what you're really saying? For a moment, something passed through her eyes, uncertainty, maybe even guilt. But then Richard's impatient voice echoed again, and she straightened her posture. Don't be dramatic, Mom. This is for the best. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and could you pack up the leftover cake? The kids want it for lunch tomorrow. I watched her leave, heard the front door shut, and the car start up and pull away. The house settled into its familiar evening quiet, but something in the silence had shifted. Something had broken, yes, but something else had stirred awake. I walked to the window and looked out over the garden I'd tended for 23 years. The roses I'd planted to mark anniversaries, birthdays, milestones, small promises I'd made to myself. Promises I'd forgotten I had a right to keep. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start keeping them again. The morning after Zoe's birthday, I woke before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house felt different, no longer empty, but full of possibility. I brewed coffee in my favorite mug, one William had given me on our 15th anniversary, with World's Best Mom painted in fading gold. And sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. For the first time in decades, I began to take stock of my life. The house was worth $380,000. I'd had it appraised 6 months ago while thinking about refinancing. My savings held $47,000, money I'd scraped together from William's life insurance and careful budgeting of Social Security. No debt, no mortgage, just utilities and upkeep. On paper, I was more financially secure than most my age. But more than that, I was free. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd found online the night before, Morrison & Associates Real Estate. A cheerful voice answered. Hello, how can I help you? I want to talk about selling my house quickly. Within 2 hours, Janet Morrison was sitting in my living room, her eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from spotting a real opportunity. Mrs. Finney, this is a gorgeous property. The market is strong in this neighborhood. I think we could have it under contract in 2 weeks, maybe less. I need it sold in 10 days, I said calmly. She raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. Can I ask why the rush? I thought of Zoe's casual certainty, treating my life like logistics to be managed. I'm making some changes. The next call was to my bank. An hour later, I sat across from a loan officer named Warren, explaining that I wanted to transfer the deed to my adopted son, Eddie, and needed to understand the tax details. Mrs. Finney, that's a significant gift. Are you sure about this? Eddie had been 17 when I took him in, a friend of Zoe's who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. For 15 years, he'd been the son I never had, calling every week, visiting holidays, bringing his wife Christine and their 3 children to Sunday dinners. He never asked for anything or took my love for granted. I'm sure, I told Warren. The third call went to the travel agency downtown. By 3 o'clock, I had a plane ticket to Paris, a reservation at a small hotel in the Loire Valley, and enrollment in a 6-week summer course at the École du Vin. The fourth call was to my lawyer, Margaret. I need to update my will and power of attorney. Margaret Todd had been my attorney for 20 years, handling my estate, guiding me through William's passing, and knowing my family's tangled history better than anyone. What kind of changes? I want to remove Zoe as beneficiary and executor. I want Eddie to manage everything. There was a long pause. Barbara, that's a big change. Are you sure you want to do this without talking to Zoe first? I'm sure. That evening, I called Eddie. His voice was warm when he answered, just as always. Hey, Mom. How are you? Christine said we should come visit this weekend. Maybe bring the kids to help in the garden. Mom. He'd called me that for 10 years, and it still made my heart swell. Eddie, I need to ask you something important. How would you feel about moving into my house? What do you mean? I explained the situation, not all the cold details or Zoe's dismissive tone, but enough. Zoe thought assisted living was best. She was probably right that the house was too big for me alone. Mom, you're 63. You're sharper than people half your age. If you want to stay in your house, then stay. But what if I don't want to? What if I want to do something different? There was a pause. Then his voice softened. Then do something different. You deserve to live how you want. The house is yours, Eddie. I'm transferring the deed tomorrow. Mom, I can't. You can. You have 3 kids who need a stable home. You've been renting that apartment for 5 years, throwing money away. This house needs a family. I took a breath. I need to know it's going to someone who sees it as a home, not just an asset. I heard him choke up on the other end. Where will you go? France. I'm going to learn about wine. That night, I called Zoe. She answered on the 4th ring, distracted. Mom, I'm putting the kids to bed. Can this wait? I wanted to tell you I won't be going to that assisted living place. What do you mean? I've made other plans. Mom, we already put down the deposit. The papers are signed. You can't just change your mind now. Actually, I can. It's my life. I heard her sigh, that familiar sound of exasperation she'd perfected as a teenager. Fine. We'll talk about this tomorrow. I'll stop by after work. I won't be here. What? I'm going to France. I'm leaving tomorrow. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, her voice returned, sharp with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't just run away because you don't like our decision. It wasn't your decision to make. Mom, you're being completely irrational. You can't just. I hung up. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 texts. I deleted them all without reading and finished packing. At 9, Eddie arrived with his family to help me load my 2 suitcases into his truck. Are you sure about this? Christine asked, hugging me tightly. I'd never been more certain of anything. Their children, my grandchildren by choice, clung to me with the pure affection I'd forgotten existed. 10-year-old Louise whispered in my ear, "We'll take good care of your roses." At the airport, Eddie walked me to security. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. You already have. For 15 years, just by being you. As I handed my boarding pass to the agent, my phone rang. Zoe's number flashed on the screen. I turned the phone off and stepped forward toward my new life. September in the Loire Valley was everything I'd dreamed of and nothing I'd expected. Morning mist clung to the vineyards like gentle fingers. The air carried the sweet scent of grapes ready to be harvested. I stood on the terrace of the Château de Chambord, a cup of coffee warming my hands, watching the sun paint the hills in gold and amber. 3 weeks had passed since I left Chicago. 3 weeks without phone calls, spent learning French words like terroir and milsime, discovering my palate could distinguish wines I'd never imagined tasting. 3 weeks rediscovering who I was before I became someone's mother, burden, or problem to solve. Bonjour, Barbara, called Marie Dubois, the sommelier instructor who had become something like a friend. Ready for today's tasting? I was staying at a small bed and breakfast in Ambrose, run by Sylvie, a woman with a charming accent who had appointed herself my guardian angel. Every morning, she packed me a lunch and sent me off to wine school with encouraging words and a kind of maternal care I'd long forgotten I deserved. The sommelier course was tougher than I expected. Not just learning to identify tannins and acidity, or distinguishing old world from new world wines, but trusting my own judgments. For so many years, I'd put other people's opinions first, other people's needs, other people's ideas of what a woman my age should do. Today we taste Chinon, Marie announced to our small class of 8 students. This wine tells the story of the land, the people who make it, the seasons that shape it. I lifted my glass, swirled the deep red liquid, and breathed in its complexity, cherry and earth, tobacco and herbs, something that spoke of autumn afternoons and long talks by the fire. For the first time in years, I trusted what I tasted. "Madame Finney," Marie asked, "what do you think?" I said slowly, surprised by the confidence in my voice, that this wine has been waiting a long time to be appreciated. That afternoon, I returned to the B&B to find Sylvie waiting with a worried look and my cell phone in her hand. "I'm sorry, but it's been ringing all day. The woman on the line sounds very upset." I stared at the phone like it was venom. 57 missed calls from Zoe, 32 from Richard, 12 from unknown numbers. The voicemail icon showed 93 messages. "Would you like me to listen to them?" Sylvie asked gently. "Sometimes it's easier when someone else hears the words first." I nodded, grateful for her kindness. Sylvie listened with the phone pressed to her ear, her expression growing more serious with each message. Finally, she set it down and looked at me with the frankness only the French can muster. "Your daughter, she is very angry. She says you have given away her inheritance. She says you have abandoned your grandchildren. She says," Sylvie paused, choosing her words carefully, "many things that are not true." "What else?" "She has hired a lawyer. She is trying to say you are not, how do you say, competent to make decisions. She wants to control your money." I sank heavily onto the small sofa in Sylvie's living room, feeling the vast ocean between me and the chaos I'd left behind. "Can she do that?" "In France, we have a saying," Sylvie said, settling beside me. A battered caravan passed by. The dogs barked, but it kept moving forward. That evening, I called Margaret Todd. It was early morning back in Chicago. She answered on the second ring. "Barbara, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know. I'm in France. Zoe has filed for conservatorship. She's claiming you're mentally incompetent and that you were coerced into transferring the property." A chill settled deep in my stomach. Can she really do that? She can try. But Barbara, you're going to have to come back and fight this. She's already frozen your bank accounts until the hearing. Frozen my accounts? What? She got a temporary restraining order. She claims you're a danger to yourself and that Eddie is financially exploiting you. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Eddie, who hadn't asked me for anything in 15 years. Eddie, who called me mom long before it was official. I know, but you have to come home. The hearing is next week. That night, sleep eluded me. I wandered through the village under the stars, past shuttered shops and the ancient church, trying to make sense of the fact that my own daughter was willing to destroy my life to control it. By the river, I sat on a stone wall and called Eddie. "Mom, are you okay? Zoe's been calling here nonstop, saying crazy things." "I'm fine. But I need to know, are you and Christine ready for this fight? Because it's going to get ugly. Mom, you gave us an incredible gift. You trusted us with your home, your sanctuary. We'll fight for you as long as it takes. It might cost us everything. Then we'll lose everything together, but we won't let her win." After I hung up, I sat by the river for a long time, watching the water flow toward the sea. In the distance, I could see the chateau where Eleanor of Aquitaine once lived, a woman who refused to be diminished by the men who tried to control her, who fought for her rights and dignity until the very end. I thought about Zoe, probably pacing in her expensive house, calculating whether this legal battle was worth the inheritance she believed was hers. I thought about Eddie and Christine, preparing to defend a gift they never asked for. I thought about my grandchildren caught in the crossfire of a war they couldn't understand. And I thought about the woman I'd become in these 3 weeks, the woman who could savor complexity in wine, speak French with growing confidence, trust her own judgment. The next morning, I booked a flight home. "You're coming back?" Sylvie asked as she drove me to the airport. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know I can't run forever." "Then you fight," she said firmly. "You fight like a French woman, with everything you've got." As the plane lifted off from Paris, I looked down at the patchwork vineyards below and made a promise to myself: no matter what happened in that courtroom, no matter what Zoe threw at me, I wouldn't go back to being the woman who stood in that kitchen 3 weeks ago, reduced to a problem to be solved. I had tasted freedom, and I would fight to keep it. The courtroom smelled of aged wood and broken promises. I sat beside Margaret Todd, my hands folded in my lap, wearing the navy dress I'd worn to Zoe's birthday party. The event that had set this unraveling in motion. Across the aisle, Zoe sat with her attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Patricia, who looked as cold as ice. Judge Henry Brown entered, and we all rose. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes that gave me hope he might listen to more than just the legal jargon. "This is a petition for conservatorship," he said, settling into his chair. "Mrs. Lofgren, you allege that your mother is mentally incompetent and unable to manage her financial affairs." Zoe's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Finney's behavior has grown increasingly erratic over the past year, culminating in her sudden decision to transfer her primary asset, a home valued at nearly $400,000, to an unrelated party, followed by her fleeing the country." I studied Zoe as her lawyer spoke. My daughter sat rigid and upright, her face carefully composed in an expression of concerned sorrow I recognized from childhood. The same look she wore when she'd broken something valuable and was trying to convince me it was an accident. "We have testimony from neighbors reporting unusual behavior," the lawyer continued. "Mrs. Finney has been seen gardening at odd hours, making repeated calls about the same matters, and isolating herself from family members who only sought to help." Margaret stood to speak. "Your Honor, Mrs. Finney is a capable adult who made a lawful decision regarding her property. Just because her daughter disagrees doesn't invalidate that choice, though it does raise some concerns." Judge Brown looked at me. "Mrs. Finney, I want to hear from you directly. Can you explain why you transferred the deed of your house to Mr. Eddie Chase?" I stood up, my legs steadier than I had expected. "Eddie isn't my son by birth, but he's family in every way that counts. He's been part of my life for 15 years. He's never demanded anything, never expected a thing, never treated my love as if it were owed." The judge regarded me kindly. "But you do have a biological daughter. Why not leave your property to her?" I turned and really looked at Zoe, saw the woman who'd stood in my kitchen 3 weeks ago and declared my life was being rearranged to suit everyone else. Because she had already told me the house would be sold to pay for the assisted living she'd picked out for me. She'd already decided my furniture was junk, my memories clutter, my wishes meaningless. I hesitated, feeling the heavy weight of 32 years of motherhood. She didn't want the house. She wanted its value. "Mom, that's not fair," Zoe said, half rising from her seat. "Is it?" I faced her fully. "Tell me, Zoe, what exactly did you say to me on your birthday? What did I say about what I could still give you?" Her face flushed as her lawyer placed a restraining hand on her arm. "I remember perfectly. You told me the only thing I could still give you was work. You said it while I was cleaning up the dishes from the party I'd spent 3 days planning, in the kitchen where I'd raised you, in the house I'd built my life in." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Brown glanced between us. "Mrs. Finney, can you tell me about your trip to France?" I enrolled in a sommelier course. I've always been interested in wine but never had the time or confidence to pursue it. I stayed in a small village, learned to trust my own palate, remembered what it was like to be seen as myself, not just as someone's mother or burden. "And your finances?" I looked to Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. I paid for the trip myself. I have no debt, no outstanding bills. I'm financially independent. Your Honor, Zoe's lawyer interrupted. Mrs. Finney abandoned her responsibilities, fled the country without informing anyone, and gave away her most valuable asset to someone she's only known 15 years. I didn't abandon anything, I said softly. For the first time in 32 years, I chose what I wanted instead of what others decided was best for me. Judge Brown leaned back. Mrs. Lofgren, I want to hear from you. Why are you seeking conservatorship? Zoe stood, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she once was, the one who climbed into my lap after nightmares, who brought me dandelions and called them flowers. I'm worried about her, she said, her voice sincere. She's been alone since Dad died. She's getting older. I just want to make sure she's cared for, by placing her in assisted living, ensuring she has professional help, making sure she isn't isolated or vulnerable. And the house? I asked, the question hanging like smoke between us. The house is too big for her, too costly to maintain. The money would be better used for her care. Better for whom? Judge Brown called a recess. In the hallway, Margaret gripped my arm. You're doing well. Stay calm. Be truthful. Eddie appeared beside me, Christine at his side. How are you holding up? I'm okay. I looked at this young man who'd become my son, who never asked for anything but had given me everything. Are you sure about this? It's not too late to return the house. Mom, he said firmly, we're family. Family doesn't abandon each other. When court resumed, Judge Brown announced his decision. This is a difficult case, he said. Mrs. Finney, you've clearly made some significant changes in your life recently. Mrs. Lofgren, your concern is understandable, but concern doesn't override autonomy. He looked at both of us. Mrs. Finney has shown that she is mentally competent, financially responsible, and capable of making informed decisions about her life. Her daughter's disagreement does not justify conservatorship. Relief washed over me, weakening my knees. However, the judge continued, this family clearly has communication problems that need addressing. Mrs. Finney, while you had every right to transfer your property as you wished, your sudden departure caused distress. He turned to Zoe. Mrs. Lofgren, your mother is 63, not 93. She has the right to live her life as she chooses, even if that includes travel, career changes, or surprising decisions about her estate. The gavel fell. Petition for conservatorship denied. In the hallway afterward, Zoe approached me. Her face streaked with tears. Her composed mask finally shattered. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that, I was just worried. I looked at her, the woman I'd raised, the person I'd loved so fully I'd lost myself along the way. You were worried about your inheritance, Zoe. There's a difference. That's not true. Then prove it, I said quietly. Prove that you want a relationship with me, not just with what I can give you. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I have to go, I said at last. I have a plane to catch. As I walked away, her voice followed me, small and uncertain. Mom, please don't go. I stopped, turned back, and looked at her one last time. I'll be in France for 3 more weeks. If you want to know me as more than your mother, as more than a problem to solve, you know where to find me. Then I headed toward the door, toward Eddie and Christine waiting in the sunlight, toward a life that was entirely my own. The harvest moon hung low above the vineyards as I walked between the rows of vines, my hands stained purple from the day's work. 2 months had passed since the court hearing. I was finishing my sommelier certification with an internship at Domaine de Rochette, a small family winery where I'd convinced the owner to let me work for room and board. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Eddie, a photo of Christine and the kids carving pumpkins on the front porch of my old house, their house now. The roses bloomed late in the background, stubborn against the coming winter. Looking good, Mom, the message read. The house is happy. I smiled and typed back. So am I. It was true. My body ached from the physical labor. My French was still rough, and I lived in a converted barn loft with questionable plumbing. But I was happier than I'd been in years. I'd learned to taste the difference between grapes grown in clay and those in limestone. I could name all the wine regions of France and explain how terroir shaped flavor. I'd made friends with other harvest workers, locals and travelers, who saw me not as someone's mother or a burden, but as Barbara, a woman who chose to change her life at 63 and had the courage to do it. "Barbara, Jean-Claude is on the phone for you," a voice called. I climbed down from the ladder, wiping my hands on my apron. Inside the small office, Jean-Claude handed me the phone with a knowing smile. "Mom." I almost didn't recognize the voice, soft, uncertain, younger than I'd heard it in years. "Hello, Zoe. I'm at the airport in Paris. I was hoping we could talk." I sat down heavily in Jean-Claude's chair, heart pounding. "How did you find me?" "Eddie gave me the address. He said you invited me." I had. 2 weeks earlier, fueled by hope and a bit of wine, I'd written her a letter, handwritten in French and English, explaining where I was and why. I ended it with an invitation. "If you want to know who I am when I'm not your mother, come see me. I'm in Paris until tomorrow morning," she went on. "Then I'm flying to Tours. I have a rental car. I could be there by afternoon." "Why now?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Because I miss you. Because I've been thinking about what you said in court. Because I want to understand what happened. Understanding isn't the same as accepting." "I know. But I want to try." That night, sleep wouldn't come. I wandered through the village, past the small church where I'd started going to Sunday Mass, even though I barely understood the homily. I thought about Zoe as a child, the way she'd insist on helping me cook even when she was too small to reach the counter. I thought about her teenage years, the slammed doors and accusations that I didn't understand her life. I thought about her wedding day, when she cried in my arms, telling me she hoped to be half the mother I was. When did we stop seeing each other? When did love become duty, relationship turn to transaction? The next afternoon, I was working in the tasting room when I heard a car crunch on the gravel driveway. Through the window, I saw a small white rental car, and a woman stepping out, looking around uncertainly. Zoe had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater, far from the designer clothes she usually favored. She looked younger, more vulnerable, the daughter I remembered. "She's here," I told Jean-Claude. "Bon," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Remember, you're the one with the power now." I stepped outside, heart pounding. Zoe saw me and paused, hand still on the car door. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." We stood there a moment. Two women who had shared a lifetime yet had become strangers. "You look different," she said finally. "I feel different." "You look happy." I nodded. "I am." She closed the car door and walked toward me slowly. "I brought you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I know it's not much." Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before, William and me at her college graduation, both beaming with pride. We looked so young, so hopeful, so sure that love was enough. "I found it when I was cleaning out Dad's study," she said. "I thought you might want it." I held the photo, feeling the weight of 23 years of marriage, partnership, and building a life together. "Thank you, Mom. I need to tell you something." When the judge denied the conservatorship, I was furious. But it wasn't just anger, I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. But also afraid of losing the idea of you. The idea that you'd always be there, always the same, always my mother first, everything else second. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear hiding beneath her anger. "I'm still your mother, Zoe. But I'm other things now, too." "Can you teach me?" she asked softly. "About wine, I mean. About whatever it is you're learning here." I smiled. Come on. Let's start with a simple tasting. We stepped into the cool stone cellar where Jean-Claude stored his best vintages. I picked up a bottle of the estate's signature Chinon, the very varietal I'd first learned to appreciate in my classes. Wine tells a story, I said, echoing Marie's words as I poured 2 glasses. But you have to be quiet enough to listen. Zoe held her glass awkwardly, clearly out of her depth. I don't know anything about wine. Neither did I, 2 months ago. I swirled my glass slowly, watching the wine cling to the sides. But I learned to trust what I taste, not what I think I should taste. She took a cautious sip, her face scrunching slightly. It's earthy. Good. What else? She tried again, more thoughtfully. There's something like cherries, but darker. Very good. You're tasting the terroir, the soil, the climate, the winemaker's hand. I set my glass down. Zoe, can I ask you something? She nodded, curious. When did you stop trusting your own taste? She looked puzzled. What do you mean? When did you start letting other people tell you what you should want? When did Richard's opinion matter more than your own? When did your friend's approval become more important than your happiness? Her face flushed. I don't. You do. You've been living a life you think you should have instead of the life you want, just like I was. She was silent for a long moment, staring into her glass as if it might hold answers. I don't even know what I want anymore. I know what I'm supposed to want, the bigger house, the better neighborhood, the right schools for the kids. But I can't remember the last time I wanted something just for myself. That's where you start. Over the next 3 days, Zoe stayed in the village and spent her time at the vineyard with me. I watched her relax slowly, saw her designer masks fall away to reveal the curious, thoughtful woman beneath. She got her hands dirty during the harvest, dirt under her once manicured nails and wine stains on her clothes. She laughed with the other workers, stumbled through conversations in broken French, and slowly began to trust her own palate during our evening tastings. On her last night, we sat on the terrace overlooking the vineyards, sharing a bottle of the estate's oldest vintage. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. A real one. Not the kind where I say sorry for hurting your feelings but secretly think you're too sensitive. I waited. I treated you like a resource, not a person. I saw your house as my inheritance, your independence as an inconvenience, your choices as problems to fix. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I lost sight of who you were before you were my mother. Who was I? I asked, genuinely wanting to hear her answer. You were the woman who taught herself piano at 40 because she'd always wanted to learn. You were the woman who read 3 books a week and had opinions about everything. You were the woman who made Dad laugh until he cried. Who threw dinner parties where everyone felt welcome. Who could fix a leaky faucet and bake a perfect souffle all in the same day. She paused. You were the woman I wanted to be when I grew up, before I decided that growing up meant becoming someone else entirely. The words hung in the warm evening air, carrying 32 years of love and misunderstanding. I don't know how to fix this, she said finally. I don't know how to be your daughter without feeling entitled to your life. You start by being honest about what you want from me. Not what you think you deserve, not what you think I owe you, but what you actually want our relationship to be. She thought for a long moment. I want to know you, the real you. Not just the mother version. I want to learn things from you that have nothing to do with parenting or family duty. I want. She struggled for the words. I want to be proud of you the way you've always been proud of me, even when I didn't deserve it. And what are you willing to give in return? Whatever you need. Space, if you need space. Time, if you need time. Respect. Definitely respect. She looked me square in the eyes. And I want to try to be someone you could be proud of, too. Not just your successful daughter, but someone worth knowing. The next morning, I drove her to the train station in Tours. She was flying back to Chicago, back to her life. But something fundamental had shifted between us. Will you come home for Christmas? She asked as we stood on the platform. I don't know, I said honestly. I might stay here through the spring. I've been offered a position at a winery in Burgundy. A job? A real job? I landed a sommelier position at a restaurant known for its small batch wines. I couldn't hide my excitement. The pay wasn't much, but I'd have my own apartment above the restaurant, and I'd be doing what I loved. Then she hugged me, tight and fierce. I'm proud of you, Mom. Proud you had the courage to leave, and proud you found the strength to create something new. As her train vanished around the curve, I drove back to the vineyard with a full heart and an uncertain future. That evening, I called Eddie. How would you feel if I stayed in France for good? I asked. I'd miss you like crazy, he said without hesitation. But I'd be happy that you found your place in the world. And Zoe? She stopped by yesterday. She looked different, lighter, somehow. She asked if she could bring the kids to see the roses bloom next spring. He paused. She also asked if I thought you'd ever forgive her. What did you say? I told him, love isn't about forgiveness. It's about choosing each other every day, as the people we really are, not the people we wish we were. 2 weeks later, I accepted the job in Burgundy. I packed my few belongings and drove north through the French countryside, past vineyards glowing in autumn gold and villages that had stood for centuries. In my new apartment above Restaurant Luro, I unpacked the photo Zoe had given me and set it on my bedside table. William and me, young, hopeful, believing in the future we were building. That future was mine to build. I had raised a daughter, loved a husband, created a home, given myself freely for decades. And now, in this small room overlooking the cobblestone streets of Beaune, I was building something else, a life entirely my own. 6 months later, Zoe sent me a letter. She was taking French lessons. She and Richard were seeing a marriage counselor. She'd quit her corporate job and was volunteering at a literacy program, something she'd always wanted to do but never found time for. I'm learning to trust my own taste, she wrote. In wine, work, and life. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. I wrote back, inviting her to visit in spring when the vines would be flowering and the countryside lush and green. I told her about my promotion to head sommelier, the small wine appreciation classes I'd started teaching tourists, and the man named Paul who owned the bookstore across the street and had begun joining me for morning coffee. But mostly, I told her about the woman I'd become, someone who trusted her own palate, spoke her mind in 2 languages, and had learned that love without independence is just another kind of cage. The letter ended with an invitation. Come see who your mother is when she's not just your mother. I think you'll like her. As I sealed the envelope, I looked out my window at the vineyard stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere among those vines, grapes were ripening slowly. Transforming from simple fruit into something complex and nuanced, something only fully appreciated by those willing to pay attention. I had finally learned to pay attention to my own transformation. And I discovered that the vintage of my life was far from over. It was just reaching its peak.